Hello and welcome back to Prompt Circle, where we discuss real-world applications of generative AI. In today's video, we're going to be continuing in our Getting Started with OpenAI Assistants series. And today we're going to be looking at the concept of function calling from your assistant. In the last video, we took a look at retrieval. We uploaded a document and we're able to query that document. So we're able to ask questions related to expense policies. Now, that is great, but there might be other things that you might want to do with a chatbot. So as an example, you might want your chatbot to be able to interact with other tools or processes that you have. So let's say you wanted to escalate the ticket or the question that has been asked by your user. You wanted to escalate that to a human agent, as an example, or a human person to actually solve it. So how would you actually solve for that with your assistant? So what OpenAI have added are the ability to use what we call functions. These functions basically produce outputs that you can use to call your own function. So we're going to take a look at how it works. So like I said, we have sort of retrieval aspect where even if I ask the question like, what is the meal expense policy all about, as an example. So when I ask this question, the assistant is going to look at the document and provide a response. So, and that's because this particular piece of information lives inside the document, and OpenAI is doing some RAG, sort of retrieval process, which they're using to provide the response. So you can see right here the information coming back. But what if I said I am looking to change my shifts from today to next week, as an example? Now, this is not something that the retrieval document can help you answer, because there is nothing related to shift changing or things like that in the retrieval side. But because our function is able to essentially understand that this requires a different process, it requires something different from my retrieval, from my document, is going to basically generate something that allows me to call a function that creates a ticket. So that's what it's going to be working on. So the output is going to be slightly different from the output that we receive when we're doing a typical retrieval process. So as you can see right here, what it did return is a JSON that contains information that we can use to create a ticket. So here it returns a subject, which is saying shift change inquiry, because I'm talking about changing my shifts. It talks about what the type of question is. It talks about the description, and it says the submit output, as an example, success true. So for instance, if you were doing this, you would provide whatever response you get back from your function, you would provide that back to the LLM, to your assistant, and your assistant would basically use that information to provide its response. So as an example, if I said something like successfully created ticket, and hit this submit, then what's going to happen is that it's going to send a response back saying that a ticket has been created successfully. So I have created a ticket for your query. Our HR team will assist with you shortly. So while we're doing it inside the playground, it doesn't really sort of show you what's going on. So let's go into Slack, where it is already implemented, and do something similar. So if I said I am looking to change my shifts from today to next week in the app that we're going to be building, or at least you're going to be seeing how you're going to build it, what's going to happen is that when I say I'm looking to change my shifts, Now, the same thing is going to happen, but this time around, it's actually going to go ahead and create an HR ticket specifically about that. And that's because we have hooked the function output that we receive from our assistant to our actual function that is working. So as you can see right here, it says I have created a ticket for your query. Our HR team will assist with you shortly. But also what has happened in the same time is that we've sent in a ticket into a channel that is responsible for handling HR tickets. And inside that channel, you could see here, it says that there's been a shift change request coming from this particular user. They're trying to do a schedule adjustments, and the description is saying that the user is looking to change their shifts from today to next week and needs guidance on the correct procedure to follow. So this is basically taking that payload that is coming back from the assistant and sending a message, or creating a ticket. So imagine this with, whatever ticketing system you might have. It could be Zendesk, it could be HubSpot, Salesforce, whatever it might be. Basically, you can take that, whatever JSON, whatever that payload is, and call a function. So I'll show you very, very quickly how to build this. All right, so before we jump into the code, let's take a look at some of the changes that we've made in both our instructions as well as the function itself that we have provided to OpenAI. So as you can see, we've added a few more things into our prompts, just making our prompts to behave in the way that we are thinking. So first and foremost, we wanted to make sure that the very first thing it's doing is that it's checking the knowledge base, which we've provided. So whatever policy documents that the bot or the assistant has access to is the first thing it's checking. And secondly, we're saying, well, if you do not find information or if you don't find an answer from the knowledge base, then your secondary objective is to create a ticket. And we're saying that it's conditional. I actually used ChatGPT to modify what I was thinking. So I think it's a helpful tip. If you're thinking about building an assistant, you're thinking about the behavior, write out the behavior in plain English in a way that you understand, and then just throw it into ChatGPT and tell it to optimize it. And that's exactly what I've done here. And it makes it much, much easy, as you can see. So that's the very first thing. You want to change these instructions and make sure that there. I have put the instructions also inside the GitHub repository, so you can use that to create your own assistant when you want to create them. The next thing that I actually added was functions. So we added function calling. So we added this create ticket function. So the create ticket function, as you can see here, we've described what this function does. So it creates a ticket in the Slack channel. The function takes the subject, the type of question, and the detailed description. So we're providing what type of parameters we expect the large language model to extract from any message that meets the creating ticket criteria. So as you can see here, so these are some of the key things. So under parameters, you want to list out, the key things: the client, the subject, the type of question, the description, and we also talked about the fact that all these are required fields. So basically, we set that up in our function, and that makes it possible for this create ticket function calling to be utilized in our system. So that's basically what it is. Just wanted to share that with you. Now let's jump inside the code. Now, so what's going on here is, like, first and foremost, we needed a function that is actually going to create a ticket. So in our case, we're creating the ticket inside a channel, as you saw before. So basically, this function creates a ticket. It takes, certain parameters, your subject, the question, the description. It takes all of that information and sends a message inside the channel. So that's our ticketing system. Our ticketing system is based on using Slack itself. This is one, interesting use case of Slack, is that you can use it as your ticketing system directly as well. So if you're doing it that way, then you have your ticket created inside this channel. So that's all that's happening. That's what our function is doing. Our function is taking inputs that include the data that is coming from the ticket that is being created, and it is simply outputting that into a channel as a newly created ticket. So we made a change to our assistants.api code, and I'm going to step through it once again just to show you how to specifically deal with function calling when it comes to assistants. Now, keep in mind, we're going to make all this code is going to be available in the GitHub, which is going to be in the description. So feel free to go in there and look at the full thing so you can follow along. You can clone the repo and work along with me like that. But let's sort of step through what's going on. So typically we're importing some of the key libraries. We're using OpenAI, of course. Okay, so first and foremost, the first thing we want to do is to define an execute function. So this function just simply calls our other function, the create ticket function. Basically, we pass in what type of function we want to call, the function name, and it basically creates this. So this is an interesting way of doing it, just simply because it gives you the ability to kind of use this for multiple functions as needed. So it kind of creates a little bit of a utility for you to do that. Next up, we basically define a function to process the thread with the assistant. So this function is where we're creating a thread, right? Remember, with assistants, you create a thread, you add messages to that thread. So this is where we're adding the messages that are coming in our case from Slack, but from whatever tool you might be building. And once we get the message added, we can then run the thread. So when we're running the thread, again, we're passing the thread ID, the assistant ID, and then we're waiting for it to complete. And to wait for it to complete, you need to check the status of the run. So each time you're running to see what the status is. So there are several statuses, as we talked about the last time. There is completed, failed, requires action. For function calling specifically, you need to listen out for this requires action status and handle that status. So that's what we're going to be doing right here. So whenever the status is requires action, we're going to be extracting some important information. So remember, when that message was sent earlier on, so if we go back to the playground, when we got the tickets, the create ticket schema, one of the things that is important is that you have to pass in what function it is, the function name, the arguments from the function. So those are all those values that were generated by the function, and you're getting all of that information and you're using that to execute the function. So remember, we have our execute function up there. So we're executing that function. So once we execute the function, we retrieve the response from the function, right? So we retrieve the response from the function. We're converting it into string because only strings are allowed with this sort of next piece that we're going to be running. The next thing we're running is to submit the tool output. So it will you run your function returns a response. When that response is returned to you, you then need to submit that response back to the assistant with this method called submit tools output. So you're passing the thread ID, the run ID, and then the tool output. So the tool output is the function that made the call and the output that it returned. So this is really where it starts to get interesting, like how you interact with the assistants and how you connect the assistants to other functions. You need to sort of have, that metadata all set up, and that's how they have done. So it's a really brilliant design by the OpenAI team to do it this way, by the way, because it really makes it much elegant to kind of build on. So the next thing we're looking at is if the run status is completed, then you break. So if it's completed, failed, or canceled, we want to break out of it. And then once we break out of it, we want to get the assistant's response. So if it is completed, for instance, it's going to have one response that says, whatever completion means. If it's failed or cancelled, then it's also going to return some kind of response as well. So to return that response, we're going into the messages, right? We're returning the messages that are part of that thread. So we go into the thread and we say, give me the message list. And from that message list, we are taking the role of the assistant, because the message that we're going to be responding back with is the one coming from the assistant. And then we're picking up the content and the value of the content. Annotations basically represent sort of the source. If you're doing retrievals, is basically where the retrieval source is going to be added to, but in our case we're just simply returning some value. We're just printing all of this out here, and once you're done with that, you can return your response text. So I'm going to run it right here as well so that you can see. I have an example here that I can run, so I'm going to stop this for a second and run. So clear and run Python assistants.py, and so you can see all that is happening, you know, when you're running this. So basically a thread gets created, message gets added, and then we start creating a run. We're retrieving the run status each time, so that's why I'm printing it aloud so you can see like what's happening. So every 2 seconds, or every 1 second, we're checking the progress, the status, and each time it's in progress, we go back, we check until it hits the requires action, or it does the retrieval, right? So this is for retrieval, which went to return information. But if we're doing for requires action, let's use a better example. So I would like to get access to a new computer. Let's use that as an example. So this should trigger a different run, considering the fact that it is more related to, you know, the second piece, which is sort of creating a ticket. Then let's go ahead and run this one. So to run this, we can go ahead and run it again. Now pay attention to this. You're going to look at the status is going to be a little bit different with this one. So we're looking at in progress for now, but once we get to requires action, it's going to do something different, because this is not a retrieval type action that is running more of the function calling action. So we're going to see a completely different run status when it gets to a point. So you can see it requires action, and it says executing the function create ticket. The function is executed, you're submitting the tool's output, the tool output is submitted. It continues to run, because at this point we're still trying to check to see when it gets to completed. Only when it gets to completed that we're able to actually provide a response, and then you have the response that it has created, and we can then incorporate that into our Slack application. So if you go back to our Slack application, all right, so to make sure that everything is working as expected, we have a function that is going to process the thread asynchronously. So we just do an acknowledgement here, and once we're done with the acknowledgement, we immediately call the process thread with assistant. And then if the response comes back, whenever it comes back, we can easily provide the response back, and we're threading that response by adding thread_ts to thread the response as a reply. Now you see the threading. The thread allows us to do this in a separate thread, and this is just to make sure that we're accounting for latency. That's essentially why we're doing this, is just to account for latency. Right, so once we have that ready, we can just simply call our Python app.py, and our application should be ready to. All right, so our Slack app is now running, and now our Slack app can work as expected. We can ask either retrieval type questions, as we have seen. We can ask retrieval type questions, or we can actually create a ticket. So this is an example of something like that. So first we asked how we can expense our meals. It returned a response based on the retrievals, capabilities of the assistant. And I said I needed access to drilling equipment, and I got a ticket created for me, and it used a function call to do that. Now, the other interesting thing that we can also continue to explore is the fact that you can add more functions. So this is a multi-function calling capability that it has. So you're not limited to just one function, you can add multiple functions. So in future videos, we'll explore, some of those things like, multi-function calling. We'll explore sort of pairing it with other assistants as well to see what's happening. But I think this is really promising for an internal HR application that can be very useful beyond just sort of doing a basic retrieval process, but also its ability to do other things, escalations, log tickets, and things like that, which can be interesting for your bot. The next one we're going to be looking at is Code Interpreter. In Code Interpreter, we're going to be looking at how we can basically run code on the fly or run services on the fly with our assistant using the Python playground that it has access to. So usually really good for things like data analysis. So I'll come up with a use case for that, and we will take a look at Code Interpreter next. Until next time, have a great one.